what it's like to be managing a technical, creative organization. I assume a lot of you are software developers, operations, maybe some managers. How many developers do we have here? Okay. What about operations? A couple of you, good. Any managers so far? A handful, yeah. All right. Well, I think that technologists can actually make some pretty great managers. And so I hope to share with you my story and things I've learned along the way, what makes a manager really great, and maybe some things that if you relate to these things, maybe you should kind of stay away from management. Let you know what you're getting into. Let's see here. All right, so my name is John Sonneville. I work for John Deere as a product lead. So I manage a software delivery team here in Des Moines, in Urbandale. I was a software developer for several years with John Deere. Got to know kind of the basics at the beginning, right out of school, and kind of grew my career through different teams, different products, different technology stacks. And I learned a lot along the way. Had some pretty great managers throughout my career, happy to say. Had some pretty bad managers. I don't know if any of you can relate. And then I've had several managers that were kind of in between. So, I mean, it's really all across the board. And I assume many of you can share your own stories that relate to that. Wasn't long before I dropped my first database on accident. So I had to quickly learn how to deal with DevOps and automation and handle different kind of scenarios. But I quickly grew to more of a senior level developer and started coaching others, new developers coming into the organization, sharing best practices and just different perspectives. And I was also gathering my own collection of perspectives from others, right? And that's really served me pretty well over time. Let's see what else. I'm also involved in several developer user groups. I'm on the board of the local Java user group here in Des Moines. I'm involved now in some, just different technology projects at home and throughout the community here. Been a manager for about a year now, and like I said, my story's been not necessarily what I expected getting into this, but had been pretty happy with it overall and had some opportunities to share my thoughts, and so wanted to share this here. So how many of you more senior developers, senior technologists can kind of relate to this feeling in your career, where you get to a certain point after several years and you kind of wonder, what's next for me? I've kind of reached the limit of this technology stack or this team or this project, maybe this company. And it may feel that way, but that's not necessarily the case, right? You may see others advancing in their career still. Maybe they're on a different track, maybe they're not, but it feels like you're stuck. And I'm here to tell you that you're not really stuck, you just may need a little bit of a change. So, some of the career paths I want to cover here. We've got architecture. So I assume most of you are familiar with this. This is probably your best chance to stay technical, continue coding on a day-to-day basis if that's what you like, if that's what you enjoy. You've got product owner or product manager, other things related to the product, shipping customer value out the door. And then you've got people leadership, what we call management. And each of these has different perspectives on the organization. Each of these requires different skills and adds different value to the organization. So what I want to focus on for the architecture, architects are really about impacting the project or the product that you're working on. The technical viability, how well is it extensive, how easily and how capable is it of being extended to meet future needs, things like that. The product owner is really about focusing on the user. So if that's your passion, if you want to learn more about users, about how they interact with your software, how they get things done, whether they're business or consumer. And finally, the managers are really about impacting the future of your organization. So that company that you're in, it's really about driving their long-term sustainability because you're helping them to grow the skill sets they need in their teams and individuals. So this conference here is a sign that the silos in our organizations are starting to come down. If there's one thing I want you to take away from this conference, it's this. It's that some of these silos, not all of them necessarily, are coming down and rather quickly. Our industry's changing. So we can see the development groups and the operation groups, the silos between those are sometimes forcefully coming down, and those two groups have to work together. Within there, your architecture group can't necessarily operate in a silo anymore. They have to understand the team's capabilities. They have to understand the product roadmap, what requirements are coming in the future, and they have to understand the existing system integrations, right? They can't just go into a new team, operate in their silo, and continue to architect from their white castle. The security group can't operate in a silo either. You have to tailor your security practices and policies to different applications, different departments. Marketing needs to understand the team's development capabilities. Minimum viable product is a thing that most marketers, it takes a while for them to understand what's that minimum piece, what's that tiniest sliver that you can actually deliver to the market and have value, right? Us as development teams need to help them understand that. Also, the relative size of work. HR can't really operate in a silo anymore. It's getting harder to screen candidates and find candidates. HR needs to understand the skills that you require on your team to make that product successful. And finally, management can't hardly operate in a silo anymore. It may take a little longer, but we're already seeing signs that management is far more capable of managing the company and its productivity, its profitability, if they're able to understand the technology and make technical decisions along the way. So I don't mean this to say that we will all fall under one function anymore. We will still definitely have these different functions, but it's dependent on us to lead this communication across these boundaries. So I think the future is going to be multidisciplinary. Some of it already is, right? So front end and back end need to understand each other, if not work closely together. More companies are going to expose their development teams to training about the customer segments, customer feedback, or even meeting the customers themselves. We're kind of making a shift from technology and being pretty cool to everyone's using technology. Technology is required, so technical skills are more required, which is actually super scary for a lot of people. If you don't have those technical abilities, that can be very frightening. And also, domain expertise is not necessarily enough anymore. So individuals without technical skills are starting to be replaced by those with technical skills. That doesn't always work so well because the domain experience is really what's necessary to make the business successful. But the technical experience is what's required to get the job done. So I'm here to say that I believe future managers will require technical skills at an increasing level. So You as technologists all have something to offer to the management in your organizations. If you start to understand their business, you're going to have a stronger voice. Also, communication skills are still going to be essential. We all work in human organizations. That's not going to change. But really what I'm getting at is we need technical managers, right? If you run a business, you're going to need people with the right combination of skills, that domain knowledge and experience. Your domain knowledge can be taught, right? You can learn about insurance. You can learn about agriculture. You can learn about manufacturing. You can learn those things. Technology is hard to teach people. The younger generation seems to pick it up easier, but it seems like we need to figure out how to educate everyone on how technology works and how to leverage it in our day-to-day lives. Who's had to ask grandma or their aunt or have them ask you how to build a website or how to handle a mobile app, right? It's not that they're incapable. You just have to show them how to do it. But that's a mobile app or website is much easier than what we all do every day, right? So businesses are discovering it's easier to teach the technologists about the domain so they get that business experience than it is to teach the business people, the marketing groups, how to use technology. So as a call to action, I want everybody here to just take a seat at the table if they can. You know, anybody know what a Luddite is? Someone who does not like technology. Yep, they don't trust it. So I'm not saying that if you don't understand technology, you're a Luddite. That's not the case. But there are some of those people in our organizations, and they would rather not trust you with your voice. They'd rather keep the control in their hands. And while that's not necessarily a problem for our careers, because we can probably find a job somewhere else, it is a problem for that business, that organization. So if you're passionate about what your organization does, I implore you to go share your voice, share your perspective. So the first thing I want to share with you about being a technical manager is it is not a promotion. It is definitely a job change. I can't say this enough. It's fundamentally different. There's this blog here I've linked at the bottom, which is essentially a blog of all the things I wish I knew before becoming a manager. It's a great read. You should check it out sometime. But my point is these roads definitely diverge in your career path. And while you might approach the road to management with hesitation, I'm here to tell you that it can be enjoyable. It can be a fun challenge, and it's very rewarding. So why would someone get into management? Well, first, you're going to get a chance to grow a new set of skills, right? You're going to have to learn what makes people tick, your team members, your peers, your boss. What gets them excited about your job? What gets them passionate about that organization? You're going to have a broader impact. How can you act as a force multiplier on your team? How can you improve communication and influence different parts of your organization? Right? As individual contributors, that's kind of hard to do. A lot of people don't want to let individual contributors control too much of the future of the organization. But as a manager, you have a lot more say. You're going to have a new type of satisfaction. I love being a developer. I love writing code and seeing the magic of lines of code turn into a usable application that makes a difference for someone. You get that same sense of magic, though, when you build a team and you can see that team start to interact. And it takes them a while, but eventually they start to piece together what's necessary to ship a product. And without writing any code yourself, or maybe you do, you can see a whole new thing take off that you helped build. Yes, you can earn more money as a manager. That is definitely a perk, and there's more room to grow there. But I will say this, That is not the only reason you should consider management. If you're purely looking for a bigger paycheck, this is not for you. So all of these things, I think, are easier by switching tracks, so to speak, right? If you go into management, if you go into product roles, right, you can achieve these things with a new sense of opportunity. So who should consider management? Not necessarily everyone, but I think a lot of you should. If you enjoy problem solving, and I know as technologists we all do, if you're passionate about helping others, whether that's others on your team, whether that's your customer, others in your organization, if you're one of those few technologists who understand that a problem's technical difficulty and its impact to the user are not necessarily correlated, that's something powerful that not all technologists understand. A lot of us, it's really easy to get bogged down with the details and so engrossed in the system that you lose sight of the whole purpose for what you're building. If you know of a better way of doing something, that's a great reason for you to get into management. You can make a difference in your organization, like I mentioned. If you feel like you have more value to contribute to your organization than just the code you write or the systems you monitor or support, the products you help implement. I work on the side with our HR group at John Deere to help our recruiting efforts, right? How can we better market ourselves to development groups, to technical staff? How can we show them what they're missing out by not applying at John Deere? Finally, if you know what kind of environment results in success for technical teams, if you understand what it takes for them to flourish, and you want to help create that environment, this is absolutely what you should do. This is your best path forward for that. So after all that, who should not be a manager? It's not for everyone. I will say, if you don't respond well to stress, just be aware that's probably going to increase. Depends on the project you're in, but you should expect at least a little bit more. Who's ever had a priority shift on their team? Never happens, right? Often that's due to poor management of competing priorities in that team, in that department. You have to get to know your team, your stakeholders, your peers, and at least 1 or 2 levels above you, I'd say. Another thing, not everyone's going to like you. That can be a hard pill to swallow. But you have to understand that due to those competing priorities, due to serving multiple masters sometimes, not everyone is going to get from you what they want or what they need. And it's your job to shelter your team from that so that your team has one singular focus, even if all your other stakeholders are bickering and arguing about what's the highest priority thing. And also, like I said, while you should expect a raise, I don't recommend taking it just for the money. So what have I learned so far? Well, a couple things. I had the privilege to build a team from scratch. When I started on this current project, I was the only member of the team. I had to hire every other role on the team. That was not easy, and it was not quick. It took a long time, but it's a fantastic opportunity. You get a lot more control over the skill sets you screen for and the personalities that you want to include on your team. The second lesson is best summarized by this tweet from Scott Hanselman, who works for Microsoft. Can't quite see it here, but it's about preventing youth soccer. So this tweet, he says, is where a lot of managers, a lot of business people, even developers sometimes, they can't focus on the goal because they're too busy focusing on the ball. And if an opposing player comes at them because they don't like confrontation, they lose sight of the goal and they just kick the ball somewhere else. So your job is to keep the focus on the goal. Another quote I love from Andrew Clay Schaefer, who did the keynote yesterday, is that you're either building a learning organization or you're losing to someone who is. So as a manager, how much time do you allow your team to learn things throughout the week? How much time do you devote for them to spend at conferences or reading in a book club within your organization? Another thing is that I think a good craftsman is able to teach his apprentice how to control the fire, right? Fire can temper the steel on your team, but too much heat is going to crack your team. And a person or a team will break, and that's not a good thing. So your role as a manager is to make sure that the team feels the right amount of heat, that they have that sense of urgency, that they understand why the work they're doing is so important. But you don't want to let them focus on only that. You want them still focused on the goal. Another thing is, a lot of us enjoy the work we do, the technical work. You can still do that as a manager, but it's going to take a lot of time and effort. Finally, sorry, I can't read this. Your peers and your boss are still learning, just like you are, right? Everyone in this role in management throughout your company, there's no cheat sheet, there's no guidebook. You know, I encourage you to discuss with your peers what they've learned and their experiences along the way. But they're learning just as much as you are. And the sooner you can realize that, and the sooner you can find your allies and share that critical knowledge, the better off you're both going to be. On a final note, never stop learning. If you're not learning, someone else is getting ahead of you, right? So some of my advice, regardless whether you want to be a manager or not, get to know what your current manager does. Get to know what their manager does. Get to know what others in your organization do. Again, it's that multidisciplinary approach. If you understand what different people in your organization do, what they're focused on, what they're driven by, you're going to be better able to handle your role in the organization. One-on-ones, this is key, something I learned. One-on-ones are for insight and transparency between those two people. They are not for project work. The majority of your time at work is spent on projects anyway. One-on-ones are not for that. You should be able to speak your mind and speak your mind, but invite feedback and ask others if they agree with you or not. If they do, okay. But really, if they don't agree, that's the feedback you want. Challenge your own ideas. Understand others' perspectives, and you'll be better off. Deliver bad news early, right? Whether it's a missed milestone or whether this 3-point story is turned into a 20-point story, whatever it is. But whatever you do when you deliver that news, be sure to share options for moving forward. How do you make this an opportunity for success? How do you get out of this situation, right? If you don't, you're just going to look like you're a crying wolf, and that's not going to help anyone. Don't overwork your team or yourself. That's not going to work very long. Might be okay for a day or two, maybe a week, but eventually it's going to catch up with you, and it's going to slow you down. And finally, I'll leave you with this note. Be the boss you've always wanted. Like I said earlier, I've had bad bosses, I've had great bosses. You all work in this industry, you know what it takes to get the job done. What do you want for a manager? Your team members probably want the same thing. So if you're willing to take a risk and step up and be the manager that you know needs to be there, the organization's going to be better off, and you'll probably be a little happier too. Thanks. I'll take any questions you have. Otherwise, head out and get some lunch. Yeah. The slide with the what? Oh, yeah, this one?